Match day hydration is without any question one of the most significant improvements that any performer can make to their match day actual performance and opportunity to get to their performance level to where they want it to be. And really, I'm just going to do it below our sort of little images here. I really want to introduce you to two main principles of hydration. So we've got two main principles, and they're things that you can apply really simply, really quickly to your match day kind of preparation and typical protocols, which I believe are going to make quite a significant difference in terms of how you perform. So what are those two main principles? And I don't think it's going to shock anyone. The principle one is what we call, let me put it in here as number one, is what we're going to put in here as begin performance well hydrated. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Begin performance well hydrated. That means that in minute one of your performance, we want to be absolutely super confident that at that point, your physiology is as hydrated as is optimal. Okay, so we want to be undertaking certain activities and behaviors and balances that make sure that's the case, more of which in a few moments' time. But the second point I would make to you, or principle number two, is that of delaying hydration. Okay, delay hydration. Now you might want to think about the word delay there, because what we're effectively intimating is that hydration in a really high intensity match type performance ultimately can't be avoided. It can only be delayed. So we want to delay hydration for as long as possible. Okay, for as long as possible. So that's what we encourage you to be looking to achieve in terms of your match day hydration. And what that should lead us to do is it ultimately should lead us to the following. It should lead us to what we're now going to refer to as a hydration strategy. Okay, a hydration strategy. And I'm going to give you one hydration strategy that you can use, which is, if you like, kind of proven on average to be effective. Now, I want to be clear here. Strategies on average don't always work, okay? Nobody out there is average. Everyone has a slightly different physiology. So what you want to do here is start with this average protocol and then tweak it to suit you. And that would be a good way to move on this. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So what do I want to do? I'll actually do it up here. I first of all want to address the idea of pre-match. And when I talk about pre-match, I am talking about anything, which is what I'm going to be referring to, anything whatsoever, which is up to 1 hour before. Okay, so be clear here. We are talking about up to 1 hour before performance. Okay, so we are not talking about the final hour. It's the time leading up to that we're referring to. So first thing I would encourage you to be doing, we want you to be sipping water. So sip water. And particularly the period we want is from so sip water from -4 hours, all the way up to -1 hour. Okay, so what that would mean is if you're performing at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, that would mean that from 11 o'clock until 2 o'clock, you are sipping on water constantly. When we say constantly, we're talking about every few minutes, right? So you're just sipping on water all the time during that 3 hour period. So from -4 hours, and I should have put in here, to -1 hour. Okay, so between 11 and sort of 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., we want you just sipping on water in that way. In other words, bringing that hydration level up to sort of like full hydration or optimal. Now, another point you might want to be thinking about is drink tea and coffee in moderation. Let me put it this way. Drink tea and coffee in moderation. And the best way to think about that is, first of all, don't get high as a kite on caffeine. Even though we'll look in other tutorials about the role of caffeine in performance, it can be quite useful. But what we're saying here is drink tea and coffee in moderation. And the key thing for me is that you never replace this with this or this, okay? In other words, if you take a cup of tea, I love a cup of tea personally as well, but if you take a cup of tea, it's in addition to the water you're sipping, not in place of it. That's the key point. And finally, we want to encourage, because of course you're going to be urinating a lot during this period, so you want to bring your urine level to straw, okay? To straw. And what we mean by that is to straw colored. So straw colored would be something like that. Okay, you want to bring your urine level there, you do not want this kind of urine level. That's the last thing that it would suggest that you're dehydrated, especially if it was browner than that. So we're looking for this kind of straw-coloured pee to be passing through your body. That's what we're trying to achieve. Okay. Now, the next point I would make to you is what we'd call over here. Let's call it over here. Let's call it pre-match. Let's call it pre-match -1, okay? And what we mean by that is that it's the last hour before performance. So what we're saying here is we want you to take 100, so again, remember you're going to be warming up in this period, that kind of thing. So we want you to take 100 millilitres of water times 3. So if you think about, if your match is starting at 2 p.m, you want to be taking 100 millilitres at 2, you want to be taking 100 millilitres at 1/4 and you want to be taking 100 millilitres at 1/2. That's your approximate structure that we'd be looking at. You might choose 1/4, 1/2, and 1/4 as an alternative, but we want 300 millilitres going in during that period. Now, another point I'd address to you is do not drink for final 15 minutes, okay? Now, don't take that as a rule, okay? It may well be that if you do a really substantial warm-up that you actually have to do that, but broadly speaking, what we're looking to avoid there is that you're getting into a situation where you're going to need to pee when you're out on the field, okay? So we're trying to avoid that. What we want to achieve is that you're really well hydrated and that last 15 minutes does not require any additional fluid. But bend that rule if you need to, but of course, what we must make sure is we urinate before going out. So urinate before going out. Okay, urinate before going out. So all of this stuff's pretty strict. We can control this directly. It becomes pretty simple, right? Now, what I'm going to talk about now is much harder. So let me drag down. I'm going to refer to this part now as what we're going to call the game, okay? The game or the match situation or the competitive situation. Okay, so what we're looking to do here, the key principle I want you to try and achieve is avoid thirst, okay? And it's a nice practical way of getting hold of these ideas. Thirst, the sensation of thirst, is what we refer to as a lagging indicator. A lagging indicator. It will tell you that you're dehydrated after you've become dehydrated. So you want to avoid thirst, not respond to thirst. Now, we also want to encourage you to use ISO or hypertonic drinks, at half time. So that's why I kind of put this shot up here of this drink in here, because of course you can use just simply using water, but ISO and hypertonic drinks, it means that you're going to also replace some lost minerals, particularly in relation to salt, which is really important for muscular contraction, but we want to be doing that at half time. So this is going to give us a little energy boost, but it's also going to give us sort of better mineral balance, which is actually quite important. And also a couple of little tips, if you can do without losing concentration on what you're doing. Drink on defensive set plays. Okay, so I'm particularly talking about corners there in football. Okay, drink on defensive set plays. So you might have some bottles behind the goal, for example. And you also want to be drinking on things like injuries, so if someone's down for a moment or two, or something like substitutions where there's time to just take on some fluid. So think about that as well. And finally, on the game side, at half time, you might want to consider an energy gel, okay? I'll talk a bit more about that in the nutrition video. So consider a gel as well. That will actually be quite useful for you. Now, final points is about post-match, okay, or post-game. Let me put it over here. So we're now post-performance, okay? So post-game. Okay, what do we want here? Well, again, we go back to our pre-game principle. We want to be sipping water, okay? Notice the word sip there. Just continuously rehydrating, putting that back in bit by bit by bit. You also, again, if you want to, you can use hypertonics. Okay, so hypertonics, the basic principle of this is they contain a greater level of mineral and energy than would be typically found inside a cell of the body, okay? So what that's going to do is it's going to encourage the passage of those things into the cells, okay? So that's kind of useful. So use hypertonics where possible. So hypertonic drinks, have a look on the label, make sure you understand what you're drinking. Kind of a tip that some of you might want to consider is protein shakes. Now the point, I'm not going to get into nutrition here, but protein shakes do not count. Now, I am not discouraging the use count. Now, I'm not discouraging the use of protein shakes, but they do not count for hydration. They count and they're useful for tissue repair, for the adaptation process after we perform. But in terms of hydration, they don't count. And again, what do we want to do? We want to return urine. This is our test, basically. Return urine to straw, okay, to straw colour. And just to remind you, we're talking about this very light colour. That's what we're looking to get our urine back to. Now, for those of you that would like to know why that this stuff is the case, and not just that you're going to try and do it, I'm going to produce an extension resource on top of this one, where we're going to kind of go into a touch of the biology, and just so you know what's happening internally. But for now, that is effectively match day hydration. Chat to me about it. Let me know what you think.